Good morning, Legacy viewers. Today we've got a very special recording. 3-2 Battalion, which started in 1975, but sadly was disbanded in 1993, has a very rich history, a very good fighting unit, and unfortunately, because it was disbanded, the history has been left to the veterans to record. Legacy Conversations have come on board with an undertaking to record the most significant parts of that history. And what better way than to start with the founding of 3-2 Battalion, which initially started as Bravo Group. So today my guests are three of those founding members: Radis Rademacher, Leon Brits, and Koenraad Stolz. All three were sergeants in those days, although Radis went on to become a lieutenant colonel. So I think without further ado, let me start this interview with these three gentlemen. So we're going to start with Radis, who is going to give us a bit of background on Savannah and the beginning of Bravo Group in 1975. Welcome, Radis.
Thank you very much, and good day. I just want to explain a little bit regarding Operation Savannah. In 1975, there was a military coup in Portugal, and it soon became clear that the Portuguese government wanted to get out of Angola. And they left rather in a hasty way. And during that period, from about September, October, it became clear that South African forces will get involved in Operation Savannah, because there was at that stage great concern, because Cubans started arriving in Angola, and they were pushing south towards the border with Southwest Africa. And therefore, it was decided that Operation Savannah will start. Now, the United States government requested the South African government to become involved. So we became a proxy of the United States. Now, one of the groups that were formed was Bravo Group. And Bravo Group, under the command of Commandant Jan Breitenbach and about 5 recce's from 1 recce, started training troops of the FNLA in Maputo. And sometime in November, they decided to start this operation. Bravo Group went south from Maputo to Rundu, and somewhere on the Okavango River, they crossed over into Southwest Africa, and they were in Southwest Africa for a brief moment, and thereafter they crossed at Nkurukuru, and they went from there through Savati, through Kwangar, and up towards Menang, and then they turned west. They went all the way to Villa Rosades, where they grouped with Battle Group Alpha, the Bushmen, and from there they started fighting north into Angola. And this group of Bravo Group were very successful. They advanced into Angola within 33 days into Angola, 3,000 kilometers. Now, there is uncertainty when Bravo Group was founded. The official date is the 27th of March, 1976. But Bravo Group already existed in November of 1975. But the official date is the 27th of March 1976. So that is a short background of Bravo Group and a very short background of Operation Savannah.
Okay, then You then started training at Mapupa. Could you give us a bit of info on that?
Yes, I was originally called up to 3SI in Potchefstroom in 74. I was selected as a leader group. I went to the School of Infantry, and at the end of that year, I became a corporal, and I was selected to stay at the infantry school as an instructor. And at the end of 75, after our troops started clearing out, we grouped a bunch of leader group, all of them second lieutenants and corporals, into a company, and we went to the border, and we became part of Battle Group Orange. And then we were also part of Operation Savannah. We went also the same route as Bravo Group, but at Kwangar we went. Kwangar we went north to what is today called Menong, Serpa Pinto, and from there to Chitembu. And then we had to withdraw after the Americans pulled the plug on us. When I got home at the infantry school, I was preparing to go on leave when I was called, and I was told that I am being transferred to Bravo Group, which I had no clue who this unit was. They just told me that Commandant Jan Breitenbach is the commanding officer. I knew Commandant Breitenbach because the Rickies at that stage just left the infantry school to Durban. So I saw Commandant Breitenbach at the distance. And of course, we heard all these terrible stories about the Rickies. And I just thought, well, this is your time, and you are probably never going to come back to South Africa walking. And that is how I got to Bravo Group. We were flown up to Rundu, and then from there we transferred to Mapupa.
Okay, then the withdrawal to Mapupa, Savati, Cuido Carnival. Could you give us some information on that?
I think maybe Koenraad and Leon must first talk about how they got involved in Bravo Group, if you don't mind.
Okay, no problem. And then the involvement of Tureki?
Yes, Tureki was also to a certain extent part of Bravo Group, and later on they became instructors. They were deployed at Cuito Carnival. They were also deployed at Savati, and later on when we withdrew to Pica-Pau, they also joined us at Pica-Pau.
Okay, great. Then I think maybe it's time to introduce Koenraad and ask him about his involvement or how he got involved with Bravo Group. Welcome, Koenraad.
Morning. Thanks, Andrew. Yes, in 1974, July 74, I was called up to 6I at Grahamstown, where we did our basics, and then I was selected to go to infantry school for the junior leadership training. We also then had the opportunity to select whether we want to stay a year, 18 months, or 2 years. And I joined 2 years at infantry school. And our course was approximately, if I can remember correctly, was almost a year long. Passed out parade, full corporal, and then I was transferred to Northwest Command, Potchefstroom, and there we were training. We were in the training section of SO3 training, where we trained all the commandos in the Northwest Command, which was the biggest command in the country. So late in 1975, I can't remember the date exactly, we heard that there was a war going on in Angola. A lot of things build up to that, and how we found out about the war, although it was most probably top secret. We were, even as infantry instructors with driver's licenses, we were tasked to drive convoys to Bloemfontein, that training area there, full of weapons, and we couldn't understand why we were doing that. And that is how we more or less found out that there was a war in Angola. So we, if I say we, it's Leon Brits and myself, he can explain that later himself. We, like I think most South African boys at that stage, wanted to join the fighting. And we were told, no, sorry, Northwest Command is a non-fighting unit, you can't go. Then we went to the brigadier, no, and then Leon and I decided we'll write to Army HQ, and for some other reason, we got permission in writing that we can go to the border. Now, to send 2 guys to the border, I think was a mission for the army. We flew up to early January 75. We flew up to Grootfontein, stayed there a week. You know what happens there. Party, drink, listen to stories from the guys that's going home. And then Leon and I got fed up, waking up, partying, sleeping, waking up, partying after a week. And when we went to see the transport manager, it was a one per Bloed, and we said to him, we're going to Rundu today. He got us onto a plane, a long argument, because we didn't have any documents with us to travel. And eventually, I think he got so fed up with Leon and myself that he put us onto a plane and off we go, Rundu. There we were marched to we found the personnel officer, a Major Minnar. We told him our story, and he said all that he can give us is clerical work in Rundu. We said to him, if you do that, put us on a plane back home, but we are not doing clerical work. We are infantry instructors. We came here to join the fighting forces of South Africa going into Angola. At that moment, more or less, a commandant walked into the room, purple beret, the major saluted him, and Commandant, Major Minnar asked him if he can use us. He asked us to explain his story, our story to him, and we explained our story to him. And yes, he said, boys, you are welcome. You are going to Bravo Group. I'm Commandant Breitenbach. Who was Commandant Breitenbach for a normal army troop, a corporal like myself? We might have heard about him, but we were not really sure what we were into. Out of the office, we walked with him to what I call a little shack, corrugated iron shack with the name Bravo Group over the door, right next to the landing strip. Got in there. He swore Leon and myself to secrecy, that we will never talk about what he's going to tell us now. And he started telling us that the two of us are going to start training Black MPLA, FNLA and UNITA troops in Angola. And I think he gave us about 2 or 3 days to prepare. And then we left for Mapupa, where the training area was that Radis mentioned. Yeah, that's how I got involved in Bravo Group.
Okay, thanks, Conrad. Leon, could you possibly just give us a bit of background on your involvement or how you got involved in Bravo Group?
Sorry. Good morning.
Sorry. Morning, Leon.
Yeah, I was in 1974. I was called up to 14th Field Regiment in Potchefstroom, which is an artillery unit. And then I did my training, my basic training there, and then I went to artillery school for leadership course. And then from there, I was also moved to SO3 training in the Northwest Commandment in Potchefstroom. That's where I met Conrad. And we did training there for commandos and school cadets, etc., etc. And then, as you said, we volunteered to go to the border, and we flew up, and he explained how we got there and how we got involved with Jan Breitenbach and Bravo Group. Yes, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Leon. Radis, would you care to elaborate a bit more on getting involved with Bravo Group?
Yes. As I said, I was transferred from the School of Infantry to Bravo Group. I arrived in Pretoria at Army HQ, where Major Don Nell, met us. We were about 4 or 5 guys. I think we were 4. And he told us that we are going to go to Bravo Group, and we will not leave the premises again because it was so secret. So we were issued with new uniforms, and about 3 days later, we were taken to Waterkloof Air Force Base, and from there we flew to Rundu. And I will never forget when we walked or when we stepped out of the aircraft, the C-130, the white sand, and it was extremely sharp and into your face. And outside was Commandant Breitenbach, or I think maybe he was a colonel then. And he greeted every one of us by saying, hello, Radis, welcome with Bravo Group. We really need you. Get your kit and come with me. So we also went to that corrugated shack. It consisted of 2 rooms. The one was the signals room, and the other one was the colonel's office with maps all over, right around. And he explained to us what we are going to do. He explained to us that we are going to go to Mapupa, that this is a top secret mission. We shouldn't talk to anyone. And about, I think 3 days later, we were on our way to Mapupa. We crossed the Kavango River on a pond. And from where we drove to Mapupa, I think it was an old Mercedes-Benz truck. At one stage, the truck broke down, and one of us, Herman Fourie, he understood, and he was a mechanic, so he fixed the truck and he drove it himself all the way to Mapupa.
Okay.
Radis, Andrew, can I just say something here, please?
Yes.
Leon and I went to Mapupa, and then that was January, and then about February, if I'm correct, Radis, they came up. It was 4 of them. 2 of the guys left us already. It's Lieutenant Berman and Peter Rose. They were two lieutenants. And then the third one with Radis was Herman, what was it? Herman Forrie. And then when Radis and those guys came to Mapupa, I think, if I'm under correction, guys, remember this is 40 plus years ago. They brought with them a signal guy, and Radis, did the translator came with you?
Yes, there was a translator as well.
His name, all that I can remember was, he was a short Portuguese guy. His name was Mario, but that is all that I can remember.
I remember
I can't, unfortunately, I've got a photograph of him with our original team, which we will post onto the video. But that is all that I can remember of those days. Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, thanks. Then I think we'll just on the beginning, the first day at Mapupa, Radis, could you maybe give us some info on the condition of the base, the condition of the troops, their families, equipment, etc., etc.?
I smelled Mapupa before I saw it. You know, there were no toilet facilities, nothing. The troops just used the veld to do their number one and number two. So it was, it stank. And the condition of the base wasn't good. There were a few bungalows inside a fenced area, and there was a very beautiful Roman Catholic church. And the rest of the troops were staying outside in makeshift shelters, a few tents. There were many troops. There were women, there were children, and the physical condition of the troops were not well. You know, they were thin. Some of them still had wounds from Savannah, and the condition of equipment was terrible. They had all kinds of weapons, AK-47s, G3 rifles, a few mortars, a few RPGs, a few machine guns, heavy machine guns, but the condition of the weapons was terrible. They didn't have clothing. Some of them had civilian clothes, others had different kinds of camouflage uniforms. And something that I will never forget was their eyes. You know, they were shocked, they were traumatized, they just lost their country, they lost their families, and they knew probably that they will never see their families again. So some of them, you know, their children was left behind, their mothers and fathers and grandparents were left behind. So the morale was also not good, and it was very tough at that stage.
Okay. Is there anything anyone else would like to add on the first day at Mapupa?
Yes, I can maybe just elaborate on that. Look, we Koenraad and myself arrived there first, and there was a guy, Commandant Breitenbach, briefed us about a guy that's operating the pontoon there, the white engineering troop, and yeah, he looked a bit bossish, but he was quite a nice guy. He was guarding the Quito River there. Now, afterwards, Major Koetser arrived, and Dr. Landman, and then Willie Greef, whether Willie Greef, yeah, Willie Greef was there as well. We were 5 guys there. Dr. Landman, Major Koetser, myself, and Willie Greef, and Koenraad then. It was at first. And then afterwards, Radis and Attia Snyman Snakes, he arrived first, and then afterwards Radis and Herman and Des Berman came before that with more troops and so on. I think that was the troops that was with Commandant Jan Breitenbach in Angola. Yeah, and then the church there served as our sleeping quarters and headquarters at that stage, and then later on we moved to the farmhouse. It was based on the banks of the river, of the Quito River. It was called the Island. That later on served as a leader group sleeping quarters when the rest of the leader group arrived. So yeah, but otherwise, as far as the conditions and stuff was concerned, I think there was buildings like, it looked like stables, and that's also where the troops stayed. And you know, it was rainy season. It was wet and dirty, and millions of flies, and so it was quite a bad state of affairs at the beginning there at Mpupa. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Andrew, can
Ben?
I add something, please?
Yes, sure.
Leon and I, the next morning, after we got there, the next morning, we were eager. We got a mission to accomplish, and that is to start training the people. And what do? You can't call the people to the parade. In the center of these outbuildings, the church was here, the airfield was on our left, the landing strip was to our left, and in the middle of all these, there was a little bit of a clearing. And the next morning, we tried to call the troops to the parade, what we call the parade ground. I could barely speak English at that stage. I was a real plain common boertjie. And how do you call the guys? You used your rifle and you shot into the air, and the people came out looking what's happening. How do we get them into some type of a formation to tree on and let's start talking to them and all that? So I think our rifle butts and rifle stocks, they were our helpers, because, you know, take 3 guys, put them here, tell the rest of the guys to tree on. Here and there was a guy that could speak a word or two and Afrikaans, but yeah, we'll get to that point a little bit later. But we had, I can't tell you the problems that we had until Radis came there with a interpreter, and he started teaching us Portuguese. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Conrad. Yeah, I would imagine training the troops. There must have been lots of challenges. As you mentioned, language was an issue, but I would imagine there were a lot of other issues. And maybe Radis, you could start by giving us some background to those issues and the training of the troops.
Yes, as Conrad said, language was a huge problem. I could also barely speak English. Some of the troops could speak a little bit of English, and even Fanagalo that they picked up on the mines in South Africa. But language was a huge problem. And when the Portuguese translator arrived, you know, it's just one guy, so everyone wanted this person to come and translate, which was not possible. And it was at that stage that I realized how good it is to have a sand model. So I built a sand model, and I would take a little stick and I would show a troop, this is you, and I would put the stick on the sand model, and I would tell him, this is you, and the arc of fire is in that direction, and we are going to advance in that direction. And the sand model really helped. But language was a problem, and I remember Colonel Breitenbach always said, at that stage, the South African military had a policy of 50% English and 50% Afrikaans, and 3 months later, we all spoke Portuguese. And fortunately, the troops also, helped us to understand Portuguese. We couldn't speak it fluently, but, things like avança, go forward, folga, shoot, regua, fall back, although that was something that we did not train the troops on because we never believed in, retreating. And with time, we picked up some phrases and we could make ourselves more clear. But language was really, really, in the beginning, a huge, huge challenge.
Okay, then sort of other challenges, lack of discipline, interference, possibly?
Yes, the standards of the troops were not good. I remember they couldn't shoot out of their shoulders. They would either fire from their hips or even from their knees, and we had to show them, listen, your rifle has a butt for a reason, and it has sights for a reason. And we started showing them what is a double tap. We teach them what is Drake shooting, and it became better and better and better. Discipline in the beginning was not good. You can think for yourself, they were from different areas of Angola, and they called themselves in these companies the names from where they came. The Sada Bandera group, the Novo Redondo group, the Luso group. And in the evenings, they would fight each other and they would say, you Sada Bandera guys ran away in that battle, so we're going to sort you out now. And we always had a duty officer in the church, and as a 20-year-old guy, you had to step in and, sorry for my Afrikaans, we used to bliksem them, because that was the only, at that stage, language that they understood. So discipline was really, really, in the beginning, difficult. They didn't understand our way of discipline. They were a liberation movement, and they did what they wanted to do. And it took us time to gradually teach them what discipline is, what fire discipline is. But over time, it became better. They also had senior leaders that called themselves commandantes and colonels. Now, with all due respect, they were utterly useless. They were senior guys. These senior people never worked. They didn't understand why they had to go out with us to the field for training. They intimidated the troops. I had one guy, I think his name was Sebastian, a big guy. I didn't like him and he didn't like me. And I knew that I will have to get rid of this guy at some stage. But some of these leader groups did not go with us back to Southwest Africa. We just left them behind, because we knew that if we do not get control over the leader group, we are going to find ourselves in great difficulties. So, but after a while, when we got rid of these people, it was far better. And then some of the new leader group stepped forward. And I recall a guy called Amandio Abreu. He became my platoon sergeant. I still view Amandio as one of my mentors. He was really a good person, a kind guy, soft-spoken, but the troops feared him because he didn't take any nonsense from them. There was another guy, his brother, Titi D'Abreu. Titi is in Pretoria. He's a Blue Bull supporter, unfortunately. And but he also stepped up. He was a young guy. In the end, he retired as a captain from 32 Battalion. And then there was another guy, which I cannot recall his name now, but also good people. So the moment we removed the senior, older, corrupt leaders, a younger generation stepped forward that we could work with. Can I continue?
Yes, yeah. Carry on. That's great.
Okay. Then also, what we also had a problem with, the MPLA, who was then the government of Angola, they pushed out a lot of stories and propaganda on radios. And the troops had radios. And they listened to this, and like we call today fake news, they believed the fake news. They were sometimes scared. In the mornings, they would say, listen, we have to leave the MPLA is less than 10 kilometers from here. And we told them, listen, it's not true. Don't believe the propaganda. But in the end, we had to physically remove the radios from the troops because it really started affecting them. And that's one thing that, the Russians and the Cubans are very good at, is propaganda and the spreading of fear amongst people. We also had many shooting accidents. They were not trained well. They frequently had negligent discharges. They shot each other through the legs and through the arms. I don't think anyone was killed. So Dr. Landman had his hands full to treat these people, and we couldn't medevac them back to South Africa or to Southwest Africa because it was a top secret mission. So we had to treat them there on the ground. We went on hunting trips. There were lots of game, and we of course made biltong, and we had the meat to eat, and we also shot large antelopes like kudos for the troops because food was scarce. The logistics from Rundu in the beginning did not work properly, so we had to feed the troops. I remember they ate a lot of rice, and then there is a little chili in Angola. It's called shindungu. Now that thing, they ate it like sweets. I couldn't touch it because it really burned, but they had it. That was part of their diet. One afternoon, late-ish, a group of soldiers arrived on Unimarks. They arrived there, and I immediately recognized Daniel Roxo. He was a legend in Mozambique. And he was the oldest at that stage person that passed selection course with the Rekkies. And I recognized him from an article that I read in South Africa in the Huisgenoot. There was a series about this guy, and I really admired him. And the next moment, here he is with his team, Danny De Silva and Robbie Ribeiro. And he was such a quiet-spoken person with blue eyes, short guy, but I could see, this guy, he knows about war. Unfortunately, a few months after we pulled out and we went back to Pick-a-Pau, Daniel and Danny hit a landmine at Deriku, and they were both killed. And Robbie Ribeiro, a day or two later, was driving from Pick-a-Pau to Rundu, and he hit a SAML head-on, and he was also killed. So that was really sad, because they were such good people and such good operators. Regarding logistic support from Rundu, there was a Major Ken Greef. He died many years ago of cancer. He later became a general. Now, I do not know, and he had big ears, so we called him Major Wingnuts Greef. But Major Wingnuts, he did wonders. He found equipment, I do not know where, beds, uniforms, ammunition for our rifles, food, tents. I still do not know where he found this, but he sent it to us in Mapupa, and later on also to Buffalo. As Leon said, we were living on a semi-island. There was a big house. It belonged to a Portuguese professional hunter. I think his name was Pelisa. And the house was still full of trophies and chairs and tables that were made from elephant feet. And that is where we stayed on that island, and the Quito Carnival was right there. And I remember how Des women caught tiger fish. We had to eat the tiger fish, and since then I've never touched the tiger fish again, because it's not a nice fish to eat. It's very muddy. That is what I have to say.
Okay, thanks, Riley.
Just on Andrew, just on the lighter side, while we stayed in the church, the troops, just like us, got rat packs. But then also the black troops, they got I don't know what to call it otherwise, but they got the maize to make kafferbier. I don't know what they used to make kafferbier. So they used it, and some of them got really sloshed, and we had problems the next morning on the parade ground talking to these guys. So we asked for one of those sacks of grain, and we made our own. Then the one corner of a church. And that was the only alcohol that we saw in the 2-3 months that we were in Mapupa. And one day Dr. Landman came to us. All of us chucked because of the toilet facilities, chucked our dried fruit there into a corner. So there was a big heap of dried fruit there. And he said to us, guys, if you really want to have a little bit of scop out of this beer, put a few of those packets of fruit into that mixture. And that chased up, or whatever, the alcohol content of that by 200%. Half a fire bucket of that was deadly. So yeah, sometimes we had, and it was a nice type of beer to drink, but the alcohol content was too high. Yeah, so that was just on the lighter side of how we enjoyed the evening sometimes as well.
Okay, that's great.
And
Maybe
then
we should.
There was, sorry, and
Sorry,
then,
I was going.
Andrew, there was a Comandante, Carlos. I've got photographs of him, and his wife. Their shelter was right next to ours. She did our cleaning of our uniforms, and okay, we never got ironed uniforms, but she did the cleaning. And sometimes she prepared us some things like bread and things like that. So yeah, they made a difference to us as well, and looked after us and respected us. I think because we were so forcefully and we were so disciplined, that gave us an edge on them, and they respected us for that. To come back to the shooting, on the landing strip, we had a couple of 440, the old 44-gallon drums. And we started there with 50 meters. And those drums, if I can call it, stayed alive for many days before somebody actually hit the drum, because their shooting capabilities was less. And like Radi said, we were so well trained in the double tap that they were quite impressed with our shooting capabilities of shooting those doof 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 every time that we aimed at it. And then also very early we realized this infighting that Radi spoke about is because of the, let's call it, different tribes, Novaredondo, Lisboa. Leon and I put those people in there, we tried to put those people into their groups, but remember, for them to move shelters in that bush and all that, that was a big problem. So we formed platoons that we started training on the discipline started where we did on the parade ground by drilling those people and getting to know the commands of how left turn, right turn, Makiri pass, and things like that. But again, the language was a problem. Thank you.
Right, I can just add to that beer that you're talking about. I think, if I remember correctly, it was an issue from the South African Army. It was called Jabula beer. Well, they knew how to mix it and how to get the most skop out of it. So you know, they did it for us. Yes. It was quite nice, yeah. But one thing about the troops I forgot to mention was one thing that they could do well, and it was a highlight every morning at the parade ground when they started singing. It was like a trained choir, and you know, they were just fantastic as far as the singing is concerned. But that's about the only thing they were good at.
Thanks, Leon. Is there anything else, Leon, from your side that you would like to add on the challenges and that you were faced with, or have you said your bit?
I think Radis and Kunrad actually mentioned quite. I don't think there's anything else I want to add at the moment.
Okay, so what has come out of this so far is we should start a brewery mixing sorghum with dried fruit.
Yeah.
Okay, then at that stage, or at some stage, you move to pick a pow. Radis, would you maybe elaborate on that movement and how you selected the soldiers and their families and just the movement to pick a pow?
Yes. It was, I think, late in March that we got instructions that we are going to move to Southwest Africa, into the Caprivi. And we then started selecting soldiers and their families. Now, it was very difficult to select them. We only wanted to take the best with us. And of course, some of them had families and children. So we also had to take that into consideration. So we selected them. Unfortunately, we could not take everyone with us. So we just took the best with us. And then we moved to pick up power on trucks, most of them Mercedes-Benz trucks, and I think a few Magirus Deutzes as well. It was rainy season. The roads were in a terrible condition. You can imagine families are moving. Some of them had furniture. They had children. Some of them even had goats, dogs. And so it was quite a sight to see them traveling through the bush and all the way to Pick-a-Pau. It was difficult. We were basically appointed as convoy commanders, and we were also at that stage worried that we could be picked up by aeroplanes. So we were also worried about an air attack. Fortunately, that did not happen. And we crossed the Kavango River at various places. And yeah, and then we arrived at Pick-a-Pau, and we will talk a bit later about Pick-a-Pau.
Okay, thanks. Koenraad, would you like to add anything on the move to Pick-a-Pau?
Yes, Andrew. When the talk started that we must, in March, that we must start moving back to the States, that is Southwest Africa, and we were going to set up a camp there. I was sent by Major, what is his, Kutzer, to go and pick up some more refugees somewhere. And I left here in the middle of March, maybe more to the 20th, around there of March. I moved with 3 Unimogs to go and pick up these refugees with 2 Angolan drivers. And we gave them a quick training session there on how to drive the drivers that could drive, how the Unimogs work. And on our way there, it was supposed to be an hour trip. It took us 3 days because one of the Unimogs, the driver didn't put the diesel cap in. We went through the river, water in the diesel. We left it there. We picked up the refugees about on the morning of day 2. No food, no water, nothing. It was an hour's drive. And then what happened was that the second Unimog, driven by one of those guys, my Unimog was the only one that made it back. But after 3 days of hardship, hunger, thirst, I was ready to give up, and I was towing one of the Unimogs with 3 Unimogs people on it. And that driver will fall asleep behind the steering wheel. And then the wheels will, remember it's sand, the wheels will turn, and my Unimog couldn't, with a buildup of sand in front of that, we couldn't. And I really gave up, and I decided that is it. And then we started hearing vehicles, and the only thing that I saw was 2 big barrels like this coming around the bend. And I decided, I had 2 or 3 magazines of ammunition with me, and I don't know what they had, but yeah, that was the end of me. And I said thank you and goodbye. And it was Leon and I counted Radis, Leon and Snakes that came around the bend with Unimorphs that was fitted with 250 water-cooled brownies. Brownings. And they had a tin of ideal milk with them. And I can tell you, I've never had such a nice beer in my life than that tin of ideal milk. And we transferred some of the troops to them. But I've got a problem with this whole move story of, and I think Radis and Leon will agree with me. The war stopped, according to the resolution, on the 27th of March, and we all had to be out of Angola by that time. I say that we only got out of Angola in the middle of April. And this is facts. I don't know where the people got their idea that we moved on. We were in South Africa on the 27th of March, but we were still in Angola in April. And then the move started, and we had to move so that when we went over the river, we had to travel at night time to get to Pick and Pau, which, if you translate it, means woodpecker. And that is how we ended up in Woodpecker. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Conrad. Then, Roddy's, maybe if you could give us a bit on the arrival at Pick and Pau. Obviously, there were issues when you arrived there, and how you sorted them out, etc.
So the rain was coming down in buckets, and it was cold. Everyone was wet. There were absolutely nothing. It was virgin bush, massive trees, but there was nothing.
I can hear you again.
Okay, fine. I've just switched to a different network. So we arrived there, virgin bush, massive trees, and nothing. We had to make makeshift shelters, a few tents. It was really, really tough. Can you hear me?
Yes, now you're fine.
Okay, so the troops were, of course, not very happy. They were not used to this kind of living, and we were close to a mutiny. Fortunately, the leader group stood with us, and they calmed everyone down. Food distribution was a challenge. I remember that we issued the married couples with food for 2 weeks, and the single guys, we made a makeshift dining facility, and that's where they ate. That's where we ate, and it consisted of rice and meat and rice. That's all we had. It was an open air kitchen. There was no equipment, nothing. And in the meantime, we also had to continue with training, because we were on the verge of going back into Angola for operations. So we had to train. I remember we had an old bazookas, and the sight of the bazookas has a rubber piece at the back to protect your eyes. In some cases, that rubber piece was missing, so every time you shot the bazooka, the rubber piece would hit your eyebrow. So most of us walked around with damaged eyebrows and cut eyebrows. There was a lack of uniforms. The uniforms came, some of them old Second World War uniforms, old Second World War webbings. So we had to basically make our own webbings and make our own backpacks. The troop didn't get salaries, nothing. It only, after a while, after a few months, they were paid, and they were paid 10 rand per troop. And I remember the money would arrive in trommels, and we would issue them with 10 rand, which was actually it was actually nothing. So we had to find solutions, or we were really on the verge of failing. And then on top of that, the group from Savati also arrived, so there were more troops and more families. And but in the end, we prevailed. In the end, we made it work. Later on, more tents arrived, and the families could then live better. But the living conditions in the beginning was really bad.
Okay, thanks, Roddies. Leon, have you got anything to add on the arrival at Pick-a-Pow?
Yeah, when we arrived at Pick-a-Pow, Major Charlie Hochhofer was the OC at that stage, and yeah, you know, we didn't have any toilet facilities there, so we, you know, what you know, our old piss lilies and long drops and those things were the only ablution we had. And then, you know, bath, we had to bath in the river eventually we had a pipe coming out of the river over a tree, and that was our showers, etc. But otherwise, you know, it was quite rough. And at some stage we decided to at least build a bar there. And I thought that a sunken bar would fit perfectly in the environment, so we put the engineers to work, and we built the sunken bar about 4 feet underground level with a tent over it and supported the walls with sandbags. And you know, everything that was in the bar we used to bring back from Angola, from towns that we go through after ops. We collected from the pubs in the other, you know, in the towns, and bring that over and fit that into the bar. So we had quite a nice bar there in Pick-a-Pow. Yeah, the two Recce also joined us at a later stage, or they were there.
Yeah, from Savati.
So yeah, Sergeant Major Willie Ward, Harry Botha, Mike Tippett, Jan van der Merwe, Les Greiling, Neville Kleck, and those people. So yeah, it eventually became quite a busy place. But you know, the facilities slowly but surely picked up, and then you know, it started looking like something. Yeah, thanks. I think that's basically what I wanted to add there.
Okay, thanks, Leon. Then I would imagine just there must have been huge challenges commanding a group, a platoon. I'm not sure, the platoon company in a hostile area with very limited support or virtually no support. Roddies, would you like to give us some information on that?
Yes. We were not trained as platoon commanders. We were trained as platoon sergeants, and suddenly we were on the deep end, and we just had to make it work. So one of the challenges was personal weapons that worked. We had different kinds of AK-47s, different kinds of old G3s, some R1s. So we always try to standardize the weapons, because it goes about ammunition, it goes about the standard and the quality of the weapons. So we always try to have AK-47s. I had an R1 rifle with a folding butt, which is a very good rifle. And support weapons was a huge challenge. We did not have light machine guns. We had very old patrol mortars. They were actually conventional mortars that we changed into patrol mortars by welding a piece of a foot piece to it, or a piece of conveyor belt. We struggled to get claymores. The ones that we got, they were the big heavy ones. Personal kit, as I said, like the webbing, rucksacks, boots, uniforms was also a challenge. I bought my own boots. We didn't have proper maps. The maps that we had were outdated. And then we had to adapt to guerrilla warfare. We were not trained in guerrilla warfare. The troops, to a certain extent, was trained for guerrilla warfare. So we had to adapt to that as well, because we were always on foot, and we had to find the enemy. And as Colonel Breitenbach told us, go out there and harass the enemy. That was our mission. And we had to harass the enemy, and we had to find the enemy, and we had to attack them, and of course we had to kill them. We quickly had to learn how to track. We had to quickly learn how to survive off the field, because sometimes you would run out of food on a long operation. The operation normally took longer and you ran out of food, so we had to live off the field. And then platoon formations. In those days, the platoon formation was a V like this. And we quickly realized in the bush, this thing is not going to work. So we changed it into a box formation. One section in front, in an extended line, one section on the left side in single file, and one section on the right-hand side in single file, with the platoon HQ in the middle. And that worked perfectly. And also, we were so young, and some of the troops and some of the sergeants on the Angolan side, they were much older than us, much older than us. So we had also to, to win their confidence, to win their respect, and to make it work. And I still recall every time that we were in a fight, or just before a fight, they would all look at us with those white eyes, as if we knew everything. And we just had to create the impression that we know everything. Medivacs, our medics that we had in our platoons were not well trained. For the first time in my life, after a firefight, I put a drip on one of my section leaders for the first time in my life, and that is how it was. So we had to really, while we were on our operations, had to adapt to guerrilla warfare, to good leadership, and to lead from the front. That's something that I learned there. They will follow you if you go in first. And that is something that I always learned. And if you look at the casualty rates of 32 Battalion, about 50% or 45% of all those people that were killed were leader groups, second lieutenants, sergeants, and corporals. And that says everything. We had to lead from the front. And sometimes you were put in a position that you were pinned down in a firefight, and you couldn't exert proper command and control.
Okay, thanks, Roddies. And then maybe just while you on this, obviously molding these people into a unit, building a unit, must have been quite a challenge. You had different ways of thinking, different backgrounds, and yeah. So maybe if you could give us some info on that.
Yes. In the beginning, when we arrived at Pico-Pau, we were not grouped in companies, because we didn't have company commanders. We only had a few platoon commanders and a few platoon sergeants. So it was a very loose formation, or a battalion, and we had to merge them into a proper South African military unit. Discipline was a problem. The moment we crossed that river and we were in Southwest Africa, we told the troops, listen, You are now in Southwest Africa. Now you fall under the South African military, and this military runs on very, very strict discipline. And it took a while to get discipline into them. And we sometimes had to use force, of course, because that is how it worked in the bush for us. We had to basically train them to do operations the South African way. Different formations, different kinds of attacks, different kinds of flanking attacks, the role of your light machine gun group to give firing cover. So all these things that we had to do, and we were starting to build esprit de corps. And one thing I will never forget about the troops is the way they sang. They really like singing. They really like drilling. And I remember in the mornings when they came from the company or the platoon lines, the singing, and they were forming up on the parade ground on the banks of the river, and they would be singing all those war songs that they were taught in Angola. Another issue was, who are we fighting for? These troops were basically promised that we are going to train you so that we can go back to Angola to take your country back. So, you know, this euphoria of we are fighting for South Africa never existed there. We were fighting for one another. We were fighting for the unit because most of them didn't even know where South Africa was. Many of them never saw South Africa until the unit was relocated after the war back to Pomfret. So that was also a challenge, and we couldn't motivate them by saying, listen, this is a fight for South Africa, for the fatherland, because they didn't understand it. So we had to install them a pride for the unit, and we had to install them that we are fighting for each other. And then, of course, last one, pay. I already talked about pay. They were paid very poor salaries. Later on, the salaries improved a lot. And, of course, at one stage, we put up a shop, a Savi, as we called it, where the troops could buy whatever they wanted to buy. When we went on leave, the troops would give us a lot of money, and we would buy clothes for them and shoes. They liked the platform shoes, and they liked the bell-bottom jeans, and we would arrive back at Waterkloof with trunks full of clothes and other stuff for the troops. But that is how we started building this unit. And later on, when Colonel Gert Nel arrived, we really started building a unit. In the beginning, there was no time because we had time against us. We had to go back to Angola to do operations, so it was difficult. But in the end, this unit was the best guerrilla unit the South African Army ever had.
No doubt of that. Yeah, Leon, have you got anything to add on the building of a unit?
No, I think Rowley's elaborated quite well on that. The main thing was just, it was a case of who we're fighting for. And, they were so mixed up by then, it was quite difficult to really get them to see the fact that they actually South African, part of the South African Army now, and we're fighting the enemy. And as Hardy said, I think it was all basically, they were fighting for each other and for the unit, and that was the main thing.
Okay, thanks,
Can
thanks,
I,
Leon. Yeah, yes,
can I
Conrad.
add something, Andrew? In the beginning, the troops, they were well trained when we went. We had our problems. We went back. We did our duties on the other side. We even went as far as Jericho, where the MPLA established a radio station for propaganda into South Africa. We had to go and destroy that mast there and the base. And what we had in the beginning was quite a couple of deserters among the troops. And that had to be dealt with quite severely. So some of these troops will come back 2 or 3 days or 4 a week after we've been back at Pick-a-Pau. And yeah, but they got lost and this and that and all kinds of story. And at that stage, Commandant from 2 Rekkies, what was his name, Radis? Commandant
Van der Spy.
Commandant van der Spy. He did the Krijgsraad, I don't know what's that in English, the law or whatever.
Yeah.
Court martial.
Martial law or what noem jy dit, Radis?
Court martial.
Court martial.
Court martial. Court martial. He would handle the court martial, and he was a very strict man. You didn't get away with stories from him. And some of the guys got punished by severe lijfstraf, beating with whips and stuff. And we had to set examples. If we go into a firefight, you follow us and you do the best that you can do. Otherwise, when we get back to Pick-a-Pau, your backside is going to burn. That was one of the penalties that was laid upon them, was the body punishment, lijfstraf.
Corporal punishment.
Sorry, Radis?
Corporal punishment.
Corporal punishment. And yeah, but discipline, once we were at Pick-a-Pau, discipline was quickly restored to almost that of a normal South African unit. And also that 32 Battalion, Bravo group at that stage, was used for a buffer between the white South African troops on this side and the enemy on that side. So that's all that I've got to say here.
Thanks, Conrad. Then at a stage, there was a deployment to Mapupa and Mavinga. Radis, could you give us some information on that?
Yes, I would first like to start with Mavinga. I was not there, but a group of us went to Mavinga. I think it consisted of Herman Fourie and a guy called Peter Miles, and I can't recall the rest of the people. And they were, and you know, Mavinga is quite deep into Angola, and they were surprised by a FAPLA brigade, and they were bombed by aircraft, and they basically had to get out of Mavinga as quickly as possible, and they had to bombshell, and they had to escape and evade, and they had to, you know, come south towards Southwest Africa. At one stage, Peter Miles were missing. We honestly thought that he was captured, by Fapla. But in the meantime, Peter was running around with a few troops and mortars, and he was attacking the Cubans every time, and the NPLA every time they would replenish water at a river or a water hole, he would hit them with mortars. And in the end, Major Hoogapfel with the company was sent up north to get the company and to assist them, and then they pulled out. But some of the troops only arrived back at Pick-a-Pau a few weeks later, because they really escaped and evaded all the way from Mavinga back to Pick-a-Pau. And it's a long way, and it's very tough. We were instructed also to go back to Mpupa and attack Mpupa. Now, it was not a successful operation. There was nothing in Mpupa. At that stage, four guys from one recce was attached to us. Jakes Jacobs, Mario Jacobs, Floppies, Cecil Ayers, the late Cecil Ayers, and Theo Fourie. And then the two recce guys that Leon mentioned. And one night, as we were on our way to Mpupa, these recces went up north to a kraal, and people started shooting out of the kraal. So they attacked the kraal and they killed a few of the enemy. And then the next morning, we went on towards Mpupa, and there was absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. I was in a stopper group. Sergeant Major Willie Ward came to me. He gave me a landmine. He said, "Plant this landmine." And I said to him, "Sergeant Major, I have no idea how to plant a landmine." And he said, "Well, this is a good time to learn." So I planted the landmine, and then afterwards, when we pulled out, he said, "Okay, you have to lift the landmine again and bring it back with you." So that was the first operation. But something that I then started realizing is the troops, the discipline was still a problem. They were still scared, but because now they are in the real McCoy. Now we are going to fight. So and it started worrying me that the troops were not really ready for a major operation and a major fight, and we were running out of time. And I will talk a bit later when we explain about the attack on Angadima, how we overcame the problem with the troops, with their discipline in an operation. Thank you.
Okay, Leon, would you have anything to add on the deployment to Mpupa and Mavinga? Get him to unmute.
You mute.
Yeah,
Okay,
he's
sorry,
Yeah.
Mapupa, Mavinga, I was also not involved with. But as far as Mapupa is concerned, yeah, the instruction came from Commandant Jan Breitenbach that we have to go to Mapupa and prevent Fapla from taking possession of that base. And it was on the 30th of April that we went there on the command of Commandant Sabi van der Spy with 2 recce, and then the 4 recces that from one recce that Radi just mentioned. And we went out there with a gun mark that's a Unimog with a fire of brownies mounted on it. And we came there and we attacked that. We basically shot at the Catholic Church to see if anybody popped out there. But obviously it was quiet and there was nobody there. So I think, there was no sign of Fapla. So yeah, it was actually too soon. Fapla was not there at that stage. So yes, that was not a good mission. That.
Okay, thanks, Leon.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
then I think it must have been May, was it 1976 that the attack on Hangadima occurred? Or was it a bit later?
It
Yeah,
was
I
no,
think
it was in 76. I think
it was
late April.
15th of May. It happened. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, fine, fine.
Right. So, Radis, would you give us some information on that attack?
Yes, the fighting force consisted of two companies of Bravo Group, and then the four guys. No, only two guys from one recce, and the two recce contingent. And the distance that we had to travel was about 700 kilometers. And we had to travel at night because it was so secret. So we traveled from Pikkapau all the way to Rundu. And then from Rundu, we turned south on the Grootfontein Road. And then at a certain stage, we turned west. And we stopped then, and we went into a temporary base to rest. And then the next morning, we traveled west again until we hit the Bravo cut line. And then we turned north again, and we went all the way, and then we crossed the border into Angola. Now, up to that stage, we were traveling on reasonable roads. And then the moment we crossed into Angola, we started bundu bashing. There were no roads. And I will never forget Colonel van der Spey, or Commandant van der Spey, taught us how to navigate with vehicles in the bush. He drilled a little hole on the cover of the engine of a Unimog, and he put a stick in there. And then he would take a bearing, and the Unimog would pull in that direction. And he would make a mark where the shade of that little stick was. And he said to the driver, keep on driving and keep this stick on this shade on a spot on the engine. And then every 20 minutes, he would, of course, take a new bearing. And that is how we continued. And now that bundu bashing was about 170 kilometers through the bush. And it was very difficult. The vehicles started overheating. We had flat tires. It was tough. Branches would fall on you. Sometimes snakes would fall on the vehicle, and the Angolans would debus, and it would take half an hour to get them back on the vehicle again. So it was really, really, really tough. And we were always, also worried that we could be ambushed and that we could be attacked. A convoy of so many vehicles, it makes a noise, it makes a lot of dust. So I think SWAPO probably picked us up before the time, and they were ready for us, or we thought they were ready for us. We were running out of water, and at some stage we had jerry cans with water, but the jerry cans also had diesel in them. So we had to drink water with a diesel taste, and it made some of the troops sick. We assembled close to Angadima at a place called Mamuhandi. Now, Mamuhandi was always a tough area for Bravo Group and for 3-2 Battalion. The terrorists there later on became very aggressive, and we had casualties there later on during the war. Then we had to start marching or patrolling towards Angadima at night. Thick bush, very, very, very thick bush. We had to hold on to each other so that we wouldn't get lost. There was again lack of discipline. And the next morning we arrived at Angadima. It's a huge shana, an open space from north to south. And there was nothing, absolutely nothing. I think the SWAPO picked us up before, probably with recce teams and the noise and the dust, and they pulled away. So Angadima was also a lemon. We withdraw again to Mamohandi, and it was at Mamohandi that we slept the night. We were attacked by Swapo. We lost our first 3-2 Bravo group troop. He was killed, and we had to bury him right there. Yeah, he was our first casualty at Mamohandi. And then the next morning, Commandant van der Spey told us, my company, and Gerard Kilder and Yuri Groenewald and Mario and Kloppies, you are staying behind. We want you to stay behind, and we want you to dominate this area, find Swapo, and kill them. And it was a very lonely feeling when they all left, and suddenly we were only one company, and I think 5 very, very young operators.
Okay, just as a matter of interest, you mentioned the Unimog. Was that your mode of transport, Unimogs, or were there Biffles, or?
No, that was before the Biffles.
Okay.
So we had Unimogs, as Stolla said. We had also these double barreled water-cooled 5.0 Brownings with us, and a few Land Cruisers as well. The Land Cruisers were not really built for bundu bashing, so that was also difficult. They followed at the back of the convoy because the Unimogs had to, bundu bash and open the bush for us.
Okay.
And I think, if I'm correct, there was an ambulance as well.
Okay, but probably a Unimog as well.
Also a Unimog.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Roddies. Leon, do you have anything to add on the attack on Angadima?
Yes, well, first of all, I just yeah. So first of all, I just have to mention that this was a top secret operation, as we were not supposed to be in Angola at all. So that's why we had to travel at night and do bundu bashing. But as far as Swap is concerned, I told Radis that all the way as we crossed the cut line, I could hear the drums, the bush telegraph running, the drums all the way as far as we go. The bush telegraph would run. I think they were actually they were sending messages that we are crossing the cut line. We're on our way that way. I think that was also why why they knew that we were coming. But then also as far as the thickness of the bush is concerned, when I on the way when I was dropped off when we were moving into Angadima, I was dropped off and we have to move into position. So I stumbled across Les Greiling from 2 Recce. He was nicely dug in into a bush, and the whole bush formed all around cover for him. It was quite a cozy little place that he went into. But as I entered the opening of the bush, Les swung around with his rifle and his finger on the trigger, and he nearly shot me there. His face was white and eyes wide open, and I scared him with my sudden appearance. So this is where I realized how easy an accident can happen in the bush. And then also, once we withdrew to Mamohandi again, we obviously formed the TB for the night, and that's when the attack on us happened. It was quite chaos in our TB there. You know, I was busy underneath the Unimog, getting my sleeping bag organized, because of the you know, diesel. It was lying right under the diesel tank of the Unimog, and I was trying to organize that thing, and then, you know, all hell just broke loose, and just heard the firing. Well, you know, underneath that Unimog, a bullet came right through the tire of the Unimog, right above my head. So I thought, no, it's safer facing the enemy outside than being stuck under a Unimog. You know. So I got out and I started shooting back. But then I walked around, you know, ran around and got onto the Unimog. That was the gun mock with a fiber browners mounted on it. So I got all of those fiber brownies, and there I felt much safer. You know, I had more firepower with those things, and then we gave them all the hell they could get. But it was like in about 5-10 minutes, 10 minutes time. You know, everything died, got quiet, and everything went down. So yeah, when the next morning. Commandant Sabi van der Spy took a couple of guys, and they went out to do a follow-up, but they also found nothing there. And you know, it was quite a, but it was one of my troops that was killed there, and he was lying in his position facing the enemy that night, and he was shot dead. But what was peculiar about the whole situation was that the bullet caught him in the back of his neck as he was lying flat facing the enemy, and the back of his neck. So, you know, the only explanation there was possibly that a bullet hit a tree and ricocheted down to him and hit him in the back of the neck. You know. But anyway, he got killed there, and we buried that his body underneath a tree, and we booby trapped the whole area around it. You know, we hung a rifle in the tree as well, as so it looks like somebody forgot it there. We booby trapped to mine the whole area underneath it. I don't know what happened to that afterwards. I hope somebody stepped onto it and got took out. You know. But anyway, that's yeah. As far as on the DMI, that was definitely not a good idea either.
Okay, thanks, Leon. Then you would have withdrawn from Hangadimba back to Pick-a-Pow. I don't know if Leon, you want to tell us your story as soon as you're on the line, and then we can move across to Radi's for his version.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Then we started moving back. Oh, we had to Bundabash back again because, as I already said, there's no roads, and we're still on top secret mode, you know. So then we had to move the same way we came, and it was also quite a difficult trip. And then we arrived at, yeah, we crossed the cut line, and we stayed over at, I think it was Umahani.
Yeah.
A couple of days later, late afternoon, you know, that we arrived there, and we stayed over there, and the next morning we left for Pick-a-Pow. So yeah, that was basically a quick trip back that we had there.
I don't know if you've got anything to add on the withdrawal.
No, I've got nothing. I stayed behind. I was not one of the fortunate ones that went back to Pick-a-Pow.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Then the next item or the next thing to speak about is Alpha Company was involved between Beacon 25 and Beacon 30. Roddies, I don't know if you want to give us some info on that.
Yes. After the attack, or let me rather say, after the lemon at Langadima, as I said, we went back to Mamoandi, and then the company of Leon and I think Des Berman plus 2 recce guys left, and we were left behind. And our mission was to do operations between beacons 25 to 30, and we had to harass the enemy. Now, after everyone withdrew, we as the leader group said to each other, firstly, we need to get out of that area because we were worried about counterattacks. And we were also worried about the standard of the troops. Because once again, there was a lack of discipline in an operation, and they were not ready. So we decided, let's pull out of that area to the east, and we traveled about 20 kilometers. We went over the Udilla River. Now it was a dry river. We went into that area where there was nothing. There was no water, no local population, nothing. And we decided we will have to train the troops right there in the middle of the bush in enemy territory. And so we started with discipline, with perseverance, platoon tactics, section tactics, shooting skills, over and over and over again. And the troops definitely improved. And the two recce's, Mario and Louis, added a lot of value to the training. And if I can go back to 2 recce, they were citizen force. And what I will always remember about 2 recce is how calm they were and how disciplined they were. And Commandant van der Spy, who later became a colonel, he never shouted. He never swore. He was always calm, and he kept everyone calm, but he was extremely disciplined. He didn't take any nonsense from anyone. And we really missed 2 recce when they left. Willie Ward, Jan van der Merwe, Neville Clack, Les Greyling, Mike Tippett. I can't remember them all. But then we started this training, and we did good training. We had airdrops, and with airdrops, we even had to exfiltrate further away. And the DAX would come in at midnight, full moon, and they would drop the airdrop. And the next morning, we would gather all the food. We would bury the parachutes, and then we had to carry everything back. And that was quite a we still had Unimogs with us. So we traveled back with the Unimogs to our temporary base where we did operations. Then what we also realized, and we were told that there will be no support for us in Angola. No air support, no nothing, because we were not supposed to be there. So we had 0 support. If we had wounded or dead people, we had to carry them out to the border, and then we could call in a helicopter to medevac them. So we had 0 support during fights, no air support, nothing. After about 2.5 weeks of training, we decided that we are going to move back into the area closer to Mamoandi. And we put together a section. And it consisted of myself, Mario Jacobs, Yuri Groenewald, and 7 troops, of which 1 was a corporal. And we decided that we are going to go back for reconnaissance, and we are going to go back for quite a long period. I think the patrol would have been 10 days to test the area to see what is going on before we would go back with the company. Now, on the second day, we were at Mamuhandi, and we were going into the bush from the Shana, and we discovered a temporary base, and the tracks were fresh. And we realized these guys were probably waiting for us. So we started to follow the tracks. The bush was very thick. We were in a single file going up. I was in front, then my section leader, and then Mario Jacobs. And as we came up on this little high ground, I went right as a reconnaissance guy, and my corporal went left, and Jakes was at the back in the middle. And the next moment, all hell broke loose, and we were in an ambush. And we were trained, and we trained the troops, if we are in an ambush, you fight your way through. You don't pull back because it won't work. You have to fight your way through. So I went down on my knee, and from the left-hand side, there was a guy shooting at me. He shot me over my knuckles, and I downed him. And my section leader came running to me. He was shot in both arms. And I said to him, go back to Jakes. I went forward. And as I went down behind a bush, there was a SWAPO terrorist that I could touch. He had a PPSH submachine gun, and I could see him pull the trigger, and I thought, well, you're dead. And then I realized, no, this guy is struggling, and I shot him as well. And later, when we swept through the area, I found that his rifle or his submachine gun had a stoppage. And then I saw another guy on my right-hand side, but I, at that stage, was very worried. If I get up, my own troops would shoot me from the back. So I waited for him to basically retreat, and he retreated into my arc of fire, and I shot him as well. At the back, the troops were so close to SWAPO that the SWAPO were stabbing them with knives. And Yuri Groenewald shot a guy that was on top of one of the troops. And then the situation calmed down, and we swept through the area. There were about 35 small trenches, so it was a proper big ambush. And we had wounded. We had 3 troops, plus my section leader was wounded. We couldn't get comms with our company HQ, so I took a troop and we ran back. We got the Unimog, we drove back, put the wounded on the Unimog, and then we drove all the way back to the border, and we called in a helicopter, and the chopper took the wounded away. We went back and we followed up, and we managed to shoot a few of them again. But afterwards, what we then realized is the troops are now ready. You could see it in their body language. They were in a firefight. We killed the enemy. They did much better. Their confidence was much better. So then we felt confident enough to go back into the area and to look for SWAPO. And yes, we were quite successful during that period. If I may continue, we had huge challenges with navigation. That part of Angola is as flat as a table. There is nothing. It's flat like a table. So we had to navigate with a compass. And I remember at the School of Infantry, they always taught us, believe your compass. And that's where I really learned to believe your compass. Sometimes if the compass would show southwest, and your brain would say, no, we should go this way. And that is where I learned. And what we did is I would take a bearing and I would show the troops, and I would have one troop with me, and he counted his steps. 5,000 steps were normally about 4 kilometers because we carried heavy and the sand was thick. So your steps wasn't as big as walking normally on hard surface. At one stage, Colonel Breitenbach decided that he's going to attach people of 2 para battalion to us. I cannot recall exactly how many paratroopers, but each platoon had about 3 of them, and they added a lot of value. They increased the kill rate. They also did training, and they citizen force individuals. They stayed with us probably for about 4 to 6 weeks, and then they left. Something that was really a challenge was the lack of company commanders, because sometimes we would group together to attack a SWAPO base, and then Colonel Breitenbach would say, okay, Des Berman, you are the company commander for this attack. And then the next company commander would be myself as a young sergeant. But we made it well. We made it work. Water was a huge challenge and an issue during the dry season in Angola. Water holes were far apart. At the water holes, you had local population, you had cattle, and you also had SWAPO. So we had to be very careful. We normally replenished water at night time. That was also nerve-wracking because you could be ambushed. Fortunately, we were never ambushed at a water hole, but we went for long periods without water, and we really learned what water discipline is, because without water, you are dead. You can stay without food for a long period of time, but you cannot stay without water. I also would like to say something about a good friend of mine, Gerard Kilder. Gerard was one of the platoon commanders, a very good guy. He came from Zeerust in the Northwest province. He was deeply religious, and he was just a very good man and a very good platoon commander, and we became really good friends. And I would always remember at nighttime, especially with the full moon, Gerard would read to us from his little Bible, and he would pray. And I would always remember that he prayed for his father and mother and his sisters while we were facing death every day. And when we were lying in our trenches, he would look up and he would show us the Southern Cross, and he would always say he is very sure that that heaven is behind the Southern Cross because of the cross. Unfortunately, the next year in March, during an operation, Gerard was killed 6 weeks before he was supposed to clear out, and he would go to the University of Pretoria to study for a reverend. So it was very sad. He was the first platoon commander of 3-2 Battalion that died in action. That is all I have to say about that period.
Thanks, Radies. I think, for the younger generation that will be listening to these legacy videos, I don't think they'll understand the need to navigate by compass, navigate using the Southern Cross. I mean, technology has just changed all that. Last year when I was involved in Operation Skeptic in 1980, the Battle of Smoke Shell.
Yes.
And last year I was with the first group to actually go back to the Smoke Shell base. And
yes,
for some years, for some years they battled to find the site. And eventually we managed to get Google coordinates, and they turned to be out by some 500 meters. But, you know, when you think of the technology to help you find that, and how we found those bases with literally compasses and star navigation, today you push a button and say, take me there. But yeah, so
Yes,
it's just how generations change or advance. You know. Anyway, then the next item is I'm not sure if I pronounce it right.
O'Mahony.
O'Mahony.
Andrew, can I
Okay.
interrupt you there?
Yes, sure.
Remember, with all those, the Southern Cross, Compass, we were good at map reading. The maps that we eventually got were better, and we used those maps to navigate back to our bases.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, even I come from a relatively small place, East London, and you know, in years gone by, without the technology of GPSs, if I was in Joburg or Cape Town, you would remember landmarks. So if you had to get to somewhere, you would look at a map and you would have certain landmarks. Now you put it into a GPS, and you actually can get lost because you've forgotten about landmarks, and the GPS doesn't realize the road's closed and things like that. But it just shows how 20, 30 years ago, you knew your way around. You drove somewhere once, and you remembered landmarks along the way. And I mean, I suppose it was exactly the same in the bush. You you sort of picked landmarks, and you remembered certain things that yes, used compasses and the stars, but you also, your memory, I think your observation was a lot sharper, because you were dependent on maybe a bush or a little hill or a water hole or whatever.
Yeah, you must remember your life depended on what you
Absolutely.
saw.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think those days, you know, we were quite highly skilled in using all those methods of navigation, and basically everything in technology changed, and it's a walk in the park today if you want to do things like that, you know, using Google Maps and all that stuff. And even the weaponry of nowadays, you know, it's something out of this world.
Yeah.
In comparison to what we had at that stage, you know, I mean, we had to come by with very few facilities, in fact, you know, to do our job there.
Absolutely, and I only mentioned it on the basis that future generations are hopefully going to be viewing these videos, and for them to understand that we didn't have the technology just to push a button and say we want to go there.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, sorry. Okay, then so Roddy's, you're then going to give us some information on O'Mahony.
Yes, during that operation, one day we received an instruction from Colonel Breitenbach to go to O'Mahony. He gave us the grid reference, so we traveled there. And the reason for us traveling there was to do a reconnaissance on the base, because 32 Battalion planned to take over the base. At that stage, Springbok Commando was there. They are all from the Makwaland. Now you can imagine these guys from the Makwaland and Portuguese-speaking troops. Friendly people, hospitable. Every time we got there, they would shoot a cow, and we would have barbecue, and we would have beer. And in the end, we took over O'Mahony. The first people that arrived at O'Mahony was Major Eddie Viljoen, as we called him, Echo Victor. Eddie later on became the commanding officer of 3-2 Battalion, a very, very good commanding officer, a very good officer, and he was not scared. He was extremely courageous, and with him was Barry Roper, Lieutenant Roper. So they took over the base, and then we went back to into our operation. I'm going to continue with operating between the beacons. Later on in that year, we were more platoons, and we operated between the beacons. Let's say from beacon 24 to beacon 26, one platoon from 26 to 28, and then from 28 to 30. And we still had the mission to harass the enemy. It was always a nerve-wracking situation when we infiltrated into Angola. It's a very lonely feeling. You are only a platoon with one platoon leader. So we would, before we infiltrated, we would always, lie up, watch the other side, and then late evening we would send one section over to make the area safe, and then we would follow with the rest of the platoon. And then what I would always do is try to get away from the border as quickly as possible and as deep as possible, so that we are not surprised by SWAPO. I remember one day Des Berman and John Taylor was busy with an infiltration, and the next moment SWAPO attacked them, and it was quite chaotic. John Taylor had a stoppage on his R1, and he overwhelmed one of the SWAPOs. He took the SWAPO guy's bayonet off him, and he killed the SWAPO with a bayonet. So it was sometimes touch and go. What emotions did we have? My son one day asked me, how did you feel? And I said to him, there were only 4 or 5 of them. Fear, of course. If you operate inside Angola and you have no air support and you are lonely, if someone tells you I didn't fear, he's not telling the truth. Hunger, because it was sometimes very difficult. You ran out of food. Thirst, because of the challenge of water. Cold. At nighttime, it gets very cold in the southern parts of Angola. And during the wet season, that was normally December, January, and February, the whole of Angola and south of in Wambuland becomes one big swamp. So you had to patrol through water. You slept wet. You had to use your bivvy. If you did not pitch your bivvy correctly, you're going to sleep right through the night, getting cold, and you are wet. Of course, the platoons also supported one another. You would be in your area of responsibility, and you would hear on your eastern side, there's a contact. You would immediately be on the radio, ask what's going on, and then you would move there to support and also to help with people that were wounded. Resupplies was also a challenge. They would resupply us from Amahoni in a convoy, and they would stop on the border, and we would quickly get our food and ammunition and our rat packs, and then go back into Angola. The rat packs, after about 4 weeks, does not go well down. The food was not of high quality. It's all tinned food. I lived on bully beef and beans. Sometimes we killed a cow. Sometimes we killed a goat, and we would slaughter the cow and we would eat it. And then the troops would take some of the meat and they would smoke it. And it was not funny to walk around the bush with a piece of leg or meat sticking out of a rucksack. We sometimes also called the States. We had a frequency. We spoke via Walvis Bay, and Yes, then you could speak to your loved ones. It wasn't legal, but we did it. Then with Willie Sapat, at that stage, it was just a sand road that you got stuck in. We never drove on Willie Sapat because it was full of landmines. We always drove next to the road or away from the road because we were also worried about ambushes. So that is what I can say about operating between the beacons.
Okay, thanks, Roddies. Then at some point in time, Bravo Group joined up with one recce and sort of did
Yes.
joint ops.
Yes. It was sometime in December that we were given a mission to go into Angola between beacons 25 and 30 and find the SWAPO bases. At that stage, SWAPO moved south towards the border. It was just before the rainy season, and they were waiting for the rainy season because during the rainy season, they cross, and then it's very, very difficult to follow them up because they run through the water, they go from kraal to kraal, they hide between the local population, and we had to stop them, and we had to find the bases, and there were two bases that we had to find. So attached to us were two sections of one recce, and we were two platoons. It was my platoon, and I think the other platoon was Herman Fourie. And we had a section of one recce with us and a section with Herman. I cannot recall all the people that was with Herman, but with myself was Vingers Creer, Kriek Creer, Jeff Lorry, who else? I can't recall them all, but really good guys. And some of them just finished their selection. They did all their training, and this was also their first operation. We had to do training, so we went north of Amahoni into an area, and we did training with the recce's. It was really good training. We did trench clearing, house clearing. The ops commander was Major Henny Blau, one of the legends of one recce. And we also had one helicopter in support in case of a medevac. So we did training. How do we find SWAPO? How do we recce? And then we started infiltrating. Now, I must say that was probably one of the most difficult operations that I did. It was very dry. It was extremely hot. Some of the water holes were dried up. So we had a constant problem with water. We had a constant problem with food. It was just extremely, extremely difficult. I remember one day we got to a water hole and pigs were running out on the other side of the water hole. But we had to drink the water. So we just put in chlorine pills and we hoped that it would somehow purify the water. And but many of us had diarrhea to such an extent, sorry for my French, that some guys shat their pants. So it was really, really very, very difficult. And on top of that, we had to find SWAPO. And we were under pressure from Colonel Breitenbach because we had to stop these guys before they infiltrated. And we just couldn't get them. And then one day we decided that we are going to go in with a small team. It was myself, Vingers, Kriek, and one Angolan troop. And we patrolled towards Shana Bal. Now, a 5-man or a 4-man team cannot fight. It's not possible. It only works in the Hollywood movies. So we were very, very careful, and we approached Shana Bal from the eastern side, and we were lying up on a small little hill looking at the water hole. And the next moment, about 6 swapos appear coming down to the waterhole. And we were lying up, and I think Creek said, let's shoot them. And I said, no, the mission is to attack the base. So stick with the mission. So we then did a reconnaissance of the base. We went back, and on the night of the 1st of January, we infiltrated with the platoon and the recce's. Once again, very thick bush. And we wanted to attack the base at first light. That did not happen. We also had a support group on the border with Koos, and they had 106s and 50 Brownings. And as we were forming up, they got hit by Swapo. So there goes all the verrassing. And so we decided, listen, we need to attack now. So we formed up and we advanced, and suddenly we were in an open area and they started shooting at us. The fire was intense. One guy, Leon Burger of 1 Recce, was shot through his hip. Another guy, he was shot through his white phosphorus grenade. It didn't explode, fortunately, but he burned on his hands. Jeff Lorry was killed, and one of my troops was shot through his ankle. While we were, consolidating after the attack, the guys told me, Jeff Lorry, they think he's dead. I ran back to try and see where he is. I found him. He was lying on his stomach. I turned him around. Jeff was dead. He was a big guy. I picked him up and I started, running back to the base. And the next moment, a group of SWAT, who probably the guys that attacked the support group, came back and they started firing. I was shot through my ass. I did not run away. I was just shot through my ass. I went down. It was very sore. And I was medevaced back to 1 military hospital with Jeff Lorry. And I think the other guy's name was Blanche. I nearly died. It was it was touch and go. But something I learned in 1 military hospital, one day when I, started feeling better about 4 days after I was wounded, I started looking around me. That was still in the old 1 military hospital in Ward 2, the border ward. And I started looking around me, and I saw opposite me a guy that was shot through his head, a guy that lost his legs, a guy that was really burned seriously with phosphorus. And I thought to myself, you know what? You are okay. You need to get out of this hospital as quickly as possible. And 4 weeks later, I was discharged. Lastly, before I end, at that stage during the war, no one knew about post-traumatic stress disorder. No one. We didn't have psychologists that spoke to us and did trauma counseling. So what did we do? We drank. When we went back to the States, we fought. That was the way for us to get rid of what happened to us. It was only much, much later that PTSD was recognized. In those days, they called it BOSSIes. The Vietnam guys called it Vietnam syndrome. And it really later on, it really hit me very hard, and it started bothering me. I suffered from PTSD, not only because of Angola, but all my work thereafter in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. And I'm not ashamed to say that I went to the Denmark clinic in Pretoria for treatment, and there are many people of 3-2 Battalion that suffers from PTSD. And all I want to say to them is, go for treatment. You are not going to come out a weaker person. You are coming out as a stronger person, and it definitely helps. Because if you don't go for help, you take it out on your family, you start drinking, you become an alcoholic. I've been through all that. And today I am fortunately over that. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Rodies. Just a couple of things from my side. One of the common threads on all of this has been that 3-2 or Bravo Group worked closely with various recce units. Was this the reason for 3-2 eventually starting its own recce wing?
I think so.
Yeah.
The recce wing was founded by Willem Ratte, and they were very, very successful, very successful. And I think it probably there was definitely a demand for a recce team because at that stage, 1 recce, 2 recce, 4 recce, 5 recce was extremely busy with their own operations and their own war. So I don't think they had enough men to come and support us. And I think the belief was that we should do it on our own. We can do it on our own. And yes, we did it. I was never part of the recce team. Were you in now in the Kalahari with the recce's?
Yes, I was.
Now,
Yes.
there you met all these guys. They are now old, and some of them are fat, but they were really good operators. Really good operators.
Some really dynamic guys amongst them as well.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, then you mentioned a Te Blanche. Would that possibly have been Piet Te Blanche?
I cannot recall. I think it was Hein
Okay.
Ter Blanche, if I'm correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had a Sergeant Major Piet Te Blanche at one sign Bloem, and I see him quite regularly, and he was apparently 3-2 initially. So I just wondered if it was the same guy. Yeah, and then
no, it's not.
Yeah, and then the PTSD. I think one of the comments I've made very often is that it's one of those things that was never addressed, and possibly because it wasn't recognized. But we finished our 2 years, given a train ticket, go home. The fact that we had just come back from fairly serious operations. As I mentioned before, I was involved in Smoke Shoal, where we lost 13 guys within the first 10 minutes. And I don't believe anyone comes out of that without some form of trauma, PTSD. And
Exactly.
I think that other than counseling, I think the biggest thing is to talk to your mates. And to me, that's where social media has been a very, very powerful tool. That you form these WhatsApp groups, these Facebook groups, where you're meeting up with guys that you maybe saw 40, 45 years ago, but you all have gone through the same things and you're able to talk about it. It's it's not something that you can just talk about with your wife, your girlfriend, your children.
No, it's not.
I don't think they don't understand the background to it. But a get together, be it in Bloemfontein or Pretoria, with 10 of your mates, I think that's become very important. And I think it's probably the driving strength behind the veterans associations is that you talked about the various terms. I think we used to talk about that guy's cracked, shell shocked, cracked, or whatever. Is there anything anyone else would like to add before we wrap up?
I just wanted to add something. Yeah, I just wanted to add another thing. I want to give credit. We always give credit to the troops, but I want to give credit to the platoon commanders and the platoon sergeants. Most of them, I would say 98% of them, were national service guys that volunteered to go to 3-2. And they had to pass a stringent induction and a selection course. We did not do it because there were no time. We just did our selection in the bush. But these platoon commanders were young guys, young guys, and they volunteered to come to 3-2. And they did fantastic work, all of them. And some of them paid the highest price for the units. So I would really like to give credit to the junior leaders. Without them, the unit would have not been a success.
Yeah, I can only agree with that, and a very big success it was at the end of the day. Okay, Leon Conrad, Leon Conrad,
I would like to say something. Yes, please. My father died a Sunday in April. They found me because we were so secret. They found me. Somebody found me, and I flew back the Monday. I saw Colonel Breitenbach because he was a colonel at that stage. He said to me, he wants me back. The funeral was the Wednesday. And he said, there's no humanity leave or whatever you call it. He wants me back on the plane on the Thursday. So, yeah, it was tough times. But then I would also like to say, Leon and myself kept our promise to Commandant Breitenbach that we made in Bravo Group's office. For almost 38 years, that we kept our promise to keep quiet. And after watching the movie, The American Sniper, I phoned Leon and I said, Leon, we better make a plan. We can't die with an album full of photos and nobody knew what we did. And who would have imagined that the 5, 6 of us started this whole story and how it ended, I think in 1992, as one of the best fighting forces in the South African military history, is what we've started and what the rest of the guys afterwards achieved with 3-2 Battalion. I take my hat off for them. And then, just on the lighter side, when my father died, everybody that Monday morning quickly wrote letters that I put into my pocket so that I could go through the MPs at Rundu with nobody knowing about the letters, uncensored. And I was staying in, my parents were staying in Van der Bijl Park, and I was walking down the main street and on my way to the post office. And as I passed the door of Woolies, a little boy came out of Woolies with a clap gun, and he shot at me. And I went down in full force, flat on my stomach, there in the middle of Van der Bijl's main street. And when I realized it was a little boy playing with me, I got up, shook myself off and went to him, scratched his head and said to him, "Jy het nou vir hierdie oom lekker skrik gemaak, né?" Yeah, so that was part of his PSDS or whatever you guys call it. We never had the opportunity to be treated for that. And I think it affected all our lives in our getting older stages. So yeah. Thank you. Thank you for everybody.
Thanks, Conrad. Leon, I see you left us for a while, but I see you back. I don't know if you want to add anything just in closing.
Sorry, my power went off and the whole computer died out on me. But I'm back. No, the last thing I want to say is there's a lot of controversy about when the 3-2 Battalion, in fact, was officially started. And I see in Bottis's book, The Buffel Struikel, he mentions that in October 76, when new equipment was issued to the troops and so on, 3-2 Battalion actually officially started, and that's when 31 Battalion also officially got their name and carried on. So I presume it's more or less on that at that stage.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very controversial. 27 March is the official date, but then it was still Bravo Group, and I am not sure when it switched to 3-2. If Botti says in October, then so be it.
Yeah, there was never any, when we left as Bravo Group
Correct.
members. Record holding was non-existent in Bravo Group, according to me. There was very little record keeping. When we applied, oh yes, that is what I would like to mention. We kept quiet, and in 2018, the remaining Bravo Group members were invited to Colonel Breitenbach's birthday. I think it was his 86th birthday or 82nd birthday.
Yes.
And there was a surprise waiting for Leon and myself. Because we kept quiet, we never got any recognition, any medallions, nothing. We were surprised then by Colonel Breitenbach calling Leon and myself forward and pin our medallions on our chest in 2018. I will post photos of that as well, and that is something that will ever stay on my mind, is the privilege that we had, that our officer commanding pinned our medallions on our chest in 2018. Thank you.
It's awesome to hear that. You know, it's sad that it took 40 odd years to get there, but at least it was done with some sort of special occasion and by a special man.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Yeah, I think it's probably a good time to wrap up. Thank you for this. It's been a wonderful interview.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and then just to the legacy viewers out there, by now, by the time you hear this, you've watched a wonderful video. And until we meet again.
Thank you very much, Andrew.